right. Welcome. My music ain't playing. Welcome. We have a temporary recording moment. All right. Welcome everybody to the Stone Fruit Roll-Up. You are watching the show about building the show. There it is. Right now. With a little bit of lag there in our music, so let's just turn that on down. Okay, I definitely need a Miss Saturn, you guys, for sure. This is a Stone Fruit Roll-Up every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on LinkedIn and on YouTube. The wildly experimental show that is really about building a live show. And sometimes that is a solo presentation. And sometimes it means we get to get a guest, which I love. That's my favorite part of going live, is being able to talk to a real expert in their field or someone who's caught my curiosity. And today is absolutely no exception, because I get to introduce the Stone Fruit Roll-Up audience to the charming and delightful personality-filled tour de force that is Heather Lisle. I was introduced to Heather by a mutual colleague, Jennifer Thornton, and if anybody has an eye for personalities they're going to match up, it is JT. And so the first time I got a chance to talk to Heather, I was beyond excited, because she tackles so many of the same problems and issues that I tackle, in which I generally will take people through the process, crawling through the glass of positioning. Heather has a whole unique framework in which she's able to uncover the best ways in which to communicate with folks, and also their personality style and how they want to be communicated with, and turn that all into messaging for leaders and entrepreneur types and folks who are out there trying to move the needle on anything or get anything done. Heather has spent lots and lots of time toiling away in corporate and PR spaces and communications, and she's learned some things along the way about how people communicate, and she's turned that into a very cool business. So without further ado, I'm going to bring out this charming lady to the Stone for Roll-Up stage and hear all about this is delightful entrepreneur. Welcome, Heather, to the Stone for Roll-Up. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you so much for having me. This will be a lot of fun. And a different take on messaging. So it'll be good.
Messaging is something that just about every entrepreneur that I ever come in contact with struggles with, because they either can't kind of figure out what makes them special, unique, or different, or they haven't taken the time to really dive into what it is they're trying to say, or they just kind of get option overwhelmed by all of the things. Yeah. And so you here today, I think, is going to help so many people who are struggling with, what do I say? How do I say it? And what's the magic behind my words that convinces people to either, do my call to action, or buy the thing, or show up for the talk, or read the book, or whatever that is. So I'd like to start, if you're cool with it, kind of dispensing of the resume talk, and get right into what your magic, and get a sense for how do you define messaging to you? What does that mean?
Well, I think it all starts with, and I feel like this is oversaid. I remember when I first started out in business, and somebody was like, who is your ideal client? You really need to define who that ideal client is. And to me, that just seemed so, let's just get down to the business of marketing. Why do we need to talk about that? Let's just get down to, what does my marketing strategy need to look like, blah, blah, blah. And with the executives and the business owners and entrepreneurs that I work with, and, frankly, even people in corporate, who are you selling to? You need to intimately know who that person is in order to effectively message to them. And, just okay, if you're a mama, or if you've got kids, or if you've got friends, whatever, think about your personal life. And I can tell you that with my 3 children, I've got a boy, girl, boy, 16, 14, almost 12. And let me tell you, how I message to my son is very different than how I message to my daughter. right? And so, and how I message to other friends is very different as well too. I've got certain friends who are very dominant, and I just need to get down to business and give them the brass tacks as to what we need to be talking about. Whereas other friends really want to get into the details and know all of the behind the scenes and what's happening and going on. The same thing holds true with who it is that you're trying to sell to as well. And so, again, back when I first started my business, it was, I wanted to gloss over it because that just seems so rudimentary. But truly, it is the absolute foundational piece of how you go about marketing yourself, how you go about soliciting business, you name it. And so that's kind of where I start. And what I do is for my clients, I walk people through. It's called the DISC profile, DISC. Yes, and that's why we're discovering profiles today. But truly, I'm sure people in your audience have heard of the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or the PI index. I mean, there's a bazillion different assessment tools that are out there. I happen to use DISC because it's super simple. It's 4 quadrants of communication styles, easy to remember, easy to implement and execute. And frankly, it's communications based, which helps you in your messaging as well too. So
those personality tests have been tossed around as long as I've been working
absolutely.
in as long as I put on my first pair of pantyhose back in aught whatever and dropped myself into an office. I've been taking a strength finder,
Oh yeah.
or and I know a lot of shade has been thrown at Myers-Briggs and its origin, and is it legit or isn't legit.
Yeah,
Tell us what DISC means, what it stands
sure.
for,
Yeah.
and why to you it's relevant in today's like business arena towards
Yeah.
communications or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so DISC stands for 4 different communication styles. You've got your dominant communication style, which is an extrovert, but someone who is more task focused. This person is very has a very big presence about them, bottom liners, results oriented, again, very dominant, in personality style as well too. This person also is very, they can be decisive, very tough. They can seem pretty demanding at times as well too, but that is the dominant communication style. Okay. You have your influencer communication style, which is an extrovert, but a people focused person. This person is highly energetic, enthusiastic, positive, looks for the good in things, wants everybody to have a great time, that kind of thing. The life of the
That
party.
feels familiar. That feels real familiar.
It's so funny. I'm a combination between the I and the D. The longer that I'm in business, the closer to D I get because I've just got a lot of decisions to make and I've got to, be quick with my time. Right. And
I
so,
think it's such an important point, Heather. Sorry to interrupt you,
yeah,
but that these are malleable and can
yeah,
change over time.
yeah,
This isn't like your star chart that once you were
no,
born into this personality, it can't
change.
possibly change.
Right.
It's a little more fluid, I think, than
It is a little bit more fluid. Now, that being said, and so I'm going to go back to, so the S and the C of DISC
thank you.
are steady relators, which are introverts, but people focused. So these people they value harmony and balance. I call them the extreme collaborators. They want the team to be happy and everything moving forward and that kind of thing. They can sometimes be very indecisive at times as well too. Whereas our C type of personalities are called conscientious types. They're introverts, but they're task focused. So I tell everybody, think of I'm using air quotes here, typical accountant or typical engineer, someone who's highly analytical, highly logical, very data minded, non-emotional. And when I say non-emotional, I'm not saying that someone doesn't have emotion. They just don't display their emotions. Okay. Of course they have emotions. They're human, but is it on display for everybody to see? Not necessarily. So, it's interesting when we talk about how we can ebb and flow within the DISC. Absolutely, we can. The likelihood that someone who is an influencer type, like I mostly am, the people, extroverted type person, highly energetic, life of the party, the likelihood of me going to be a C type personality, highly analytical, logical, non-emotional, not likely. Now, do I have to morph into that C type on occasion? Yeah, absolutely. When I'm meeting with my accountant and talking about my books and I'm having to get into the details and the weeds, I ebb more into that. But by and large, my personality is a people-focused, extroverted personality. That's who I am at my core. So we all have pieces of this, that we can, ebb and flow into. But by and large, I tell my clients, I mean, first of all, they take the disc profile, so we know exactly where they are on the disc. But where does it feel like you really fall into? But then also, when it comes to your messaging and your ideal client, I want you to think about your favorite client. Where does that client fit into the circle of things as well too? And typically, not always, but typically we like to work with people who are like us, right? Who have the same characteristics and same type of personality. For me, it's really interesting. I really enjoy working with my C-type personalities because it's just I love to see the transformation of them stepping into, I say that, stepping into their power sounds so woo-woo, but stepping into who they are really destined to be, because they've always been an introvert and the quiet type and that kind of thing. I'm teaching them how to really own the space that they're in, whether that's in business development, marketing, or owning their team, or whatever it might be. And so that's, that someone who's the opposite of me is who I really enjoy working with. So
That's a beautiful yin yang situation.
I know, isn't it? It's so true.
But before we get into like identifying who your match would be, tell us a little bit about the assessment itself. When you say, "Oh, well, of course they're going to get their disc profile." Like, what does that actually mean? Is this a questionnaire or a survey?
It's a questionnaire. I mean, it's a research-based tool. And so you get a username and a password and you go through. It takes you 20 minutes or so to complete the assessment. Once you're done with the assessment, you get a 24-page report, sent back to you. I tell everybody, look at page 3. That's like the biggest page, that gives you, again, how I receive communication is I like bite-sized pieces. I don't want to read a 25-page document, but, tell me which page do I need to focus on and which information is relevant for me right now. And so you get this great document that tells you, hey, here's your communication style, and here's how you best communicate with styles different than you. It's a phenomenal tool. And so I have my clients take it. So we know precisely where they are on the disc. It's very precise. So,
well, if I took the time to do my disc assessment, I knew exactly where I stood, whether I was a D, an I, an S, or a C, but I don't know how to identify that in somebody else. I have to either ask them what they are, or how do I know what other folks are kind of coding at, particularly if they've never done the assessment themselves, or do you get just an intuition for it? Tell me how you read other people.
Yeah, it's so interesting when we talk about reading other people. This is where I've incorporated a lot of non-verbal signals into how we read people. I do a training, it's called, how to read a room in 30 seconds or less. And yes, it's good to know, of course, and I teach people how to identify those communication styles, but our non-verbal signals tell a lot as well too. So if you're an extroverted personality, you're going to walk confidently into a room, you're going to use physical space, you're going to use your hands, you're going to make eye contact, you're likely going to smile, that kind of thing. If you're an introvert, you're going to go find your chair. If you need to go plug in your laptop, you're going to find the HDMI cable. One thing that I really have to work with my introverts on is smiling and making eye contact, because we know that we can, establish trust quickly when we smile at people, and when we keep eye contact with people, that makes people trust us even more. And there's research to show this as well too. And those are the two things that sometimes get missed by, some of my introverts, and frankly, even some of my D types. The dominant types are very task focused. They miss the human component of connection. And so again, what I teach people is that when you're walking into a meeting, when you're walking into a room, having coffee with a new client or whatever, when you first walk up to that person, are they smiling at you? Or is there warmth? Right? Because if they're a warm type personality, they're likely a people focused person. Okay, so we know that. And so second thing to be looking at is, are they quiet? Do they have questions? Are they looking for you to lead the conversation? If they're looking for you to lead the conversation, they're probably not an extrovert. Okay. And so if we know that they're an introverted personality, which extroverts are very, hey, nice to meet you, extend the arm, do the handshake, go in for the hug, whatever. I mean, that's me. That's my type, right? You can tell me pretty quick when I walk into a room. But our introverts are going to have a little bit more physical space in between the people, right? They're not going to go in for that immediate hug, especially with somebody that they don't know, right? I mean, or even a handshake. They're going to say, hey, nice to meet you, or whatever. And they're going to keep a little bit more physical space. So there's some interesting dynamics that we do with our nonverbal signals that tell a lot as to the type of person that we're meeting with. So, and again, the longer that you get to know your clients and that kind of thing, you're like, okay, I mean, you can identify it pretty quickly as to their style and their type. And then getting to talk to them about who their ideal client is and what are they like? What are their tendencies? What are their characteristics? How do they communicate with you? Are they big and bold, or are they more reserved and laid back?
How do you tell the difference though between like a D and an I? If we're kind of like who's extroverted, who's
Yeah.
making the first gestures, who's open, who's gregarious versus who maybe is
Yeah.
like
So
pulling back a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah. What about
The
those
D and the
two?
I's. Yeah. So the I's are going to want to talk about your weekend. They're very sociable, very talkative. So they're going to ask questions like, hey, if you're meeting in a coffee shop or whatever, they'll ask questions about, oh my gosh, how was the traffic? When you got here, I was a few minutes late. So glad that they're going to engage in conversations like that. Whereas our dominant type people, again, they're very task focused and very results oriented. They're going to be the type that's like, hey, what do you have on the calendar? What's on the agenda for our talk today?
So
Get
just
down to
through
business.
contextual clues, if
Yes.
you learn to read the room like to
Yep.
the nth degree, and maybe stop or evolve yourself, if you will, kind of past a reactive approach to conversation,
Yeah.
reacting to how people are talking to you, and start being kind of creative and really
You gotta
more
listen.
looking, yeah,
Yeah.
more listening ears
Listening and
for
watching.
sure.
Yeah.
Then you can really make an educated guess, should we say, or an
Yeah.
assessment about, okay, like I know I'm this and I know that
Right.
person is that.
Yeah.
Now we get into the Heather Lisle magic, I think,
I think
when you can
so.
figure out the two of those. So
Yeah.
what is the key to learning how to communicate if you're an I and you're with an S or
Yeah.
vice versa?
So, I mean, and again, I'm primarily an I type. I've got some D tendencies for sure. But yesterday I facilitated a training for a large group of accountants here in Dallas, and these people are half the group were introverts. They just were. And so when I'm talking one on one with these people, I've got to slow the cadence. I talk really fast. And so I've got to slow my cadence down a little bit. I've got to slow down my hand gestures well too. I call my jazz hands. I'm always using my hands all the time to talk, right? And so for these people, I kind of like to put down the hands, talk a little bit slower, make that eye contact. Like I see you, I'm hearing you, I'm following you, I understand you. That kind of, I mean, people, eye contact, we should be holding 60 to 70% of eye contact during a course of a conversation. When people look away, I mean, again, research shows when people look away or you're on your phone or whatever the thing is, you're telling someone, I'm not really interested in what you have to say. And even though you may feel that way, even though you may be going, hey, I do want to know what this person has to say. If you're looking away, if you're looking down, if you're not making that eye contact 60 to 70% of the time, that nonverbal cue is telling people I'm not interested. And so, when I'm talking with my introverts, I make sure to keep that eye contact, slow down my speech a little bit, remove the jazz hands, and give a little bit of physical distance in between them and me as well too, just especially if it's somebody new that yesterday, several people met for the first time. I'm not going to be the hugger with them because I just know that like that's too much. And so, it's so funny. I was talking to someone recently and they were like, well, so you're telling me how to do all of this stuff. And that's not me, so I just don't feel like that's me. I'm like, okay, I get that. But truly feel like, again, in order to establish that trust and rapport and for people to want to do the thing that you want them to do, you've got to meet people where they're at. And if they're a little bit different than you, we've got to honor that as well too. We just can't expect people to communicate like we do. We've got to honor where they're at and meet them in the middle, And so you've got to tone things down. If you're a big personality like I am, you've got to tone it down in order to be able to establish that connection.
Heather, what advice would you give to people who are neurodivergent or autistic and really struggle with eye contact?
Oh gosh, I don't know. That is not an area that I speak a lot to at all. And so I don't feel like I'm the expert who can
Is
do
there
that.
is there another way you can communicate that interest and connectedness that isn't eye contact?
Hmm. Again, it's just research says smile and eye contact are the two big things that you need to do in order to establish trust, with people that you're working with. So
Maybe a little fake it till you make it and a little trust building in the other way.
absolutely, and again, I'm no expert at all when it comes to those who have differences and disabilities and that kind of thing. But I'm a big fan of just being very upfront and telling people, here's what to expect. I like that with my clients too. If there's something going on, just give me the expectation. I can work around whatever. If we know as humans what to expect from the other human that we're working with, that's all we really need, right? Just tell me what's going on. We can make it work.
That's the heart of communication.
It is. It
All
is.
right, so maybe it's easy for the D's and the I's to tone down their jazz hands, but what about for the S's and the C's to then interact
Yeah.
with the D's and the I's, where
They,
maybe it's a little harder to make that transition? I'm asking.
yeah.
I genuinely don't know.
Oh, sure. No, and again, I'm just going back to my group that I was with yesterday. I had to tell my introverts, I'm like, okay, if we're asking our extroverted colleagues to do this over here, to tone it down and to be aware of, the things that you need, when you need something, you've got to step up and articulate what you need as well too. Now, whether that's in the form of an email beforehand, because large groups tend to freak some people out, but it all goes back to, again, setting that expectation and being upfront about your needs. And so I tell my introverts, I'm like, okay, what we don't want, and what was happening yesterday in this group that I was working with, is that, you have some people who are, fresh, new into this profession or whatnot. And they're a high introvert and highly analytical and all of these things. And they don't want to disappoint the boss, they don't want to disappoint the client, so they just think that they can manage problems. But then a problem becomes a car crash on the side of the road with the car on fire and everything's happening. It's like you have to tell people what's going on. No one likes surprises in business. No one. It's like I'm not even a fan of surprise birthday parties, much less having someone surprise me in business. It's like you've got to step out of your comfort zone and, again, express those either frustrations, expectations, whatever the thing is that's going on. You got to do that too. You got to do that too. Now, think about the best way, to do that for you. And that might be in the form of an email. That might be in a form of a one-on-one conversation versus a large group conversation. Either way, figure out what's going to work best for you, and you got to make it happen.
So know thyself.
No, isn't this all what it's about? I feel like life is just like a journey of self-awareness. Like, who am I? What do
Absolutely.
I need? How do I articulate it? And to whom the person is that I'm trying to articulate things to, is hugely important as well.
And compassionate for yourself. I think that, if you're the big extrovert who's always like in the room and everyone's always like, you're too much.
Yeah,
Having compassion for being accepting, whatever. There's such thing as too
absolutely.
much, and empathy for folks who maybe don't communicate the same way
Right.
that you do. You really brought us to a wonderful space here, Heather, here on the Stone Fruit Roll Up every Thursday, 1:30 Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube and LinkedIn. And we are talking to Heather Lisle. If you're just joining us, who is a messaging expert and a communications diva, shall we say.
There you go. I'll take it.
And I'd love to hear a little bit more. We just learned what is DISC assessment. We've just learned how to kind of figure it out for yourself, how
Yeah.
to figure it out in other people without them actually either knowing or taking the assessment themselves, how to emulate or be fluid or flexible with your communication style in the assumption that not everybody communicates like you.
Right.
Now,
Right.
I'd love to hear a little bit more. You've been alluding to some group work that you were doing. We were leading a project. I know you take on one-on-one client work. Tell us more who you work for, who you help, and actually the nuts and bolts of how you do that
Yeah.
voodoo that you do so
You
well.
know, it's so interesting. I mostly work with professional services providers, so accountants, law firm, accounting firm owners, law firm owner, managing partners, partners at firms, that kind of thing is who I primarily work with. But it's so interesting. I do want to touch on just really quickly, when we talk about our messaging, especially as an entrepreneur and business owner, which I know these are the people that you work with a lot, Rebecca, how do you message yourself? Okay. Well, if you know that your ideal client is more on the extroverted side of things, okay? And I've got a free resource on my website that I would love for people just to go and just grab because it's an awesome free resource. I actually tell you how to communicate with those types. So for my extroverted types, your messaging, your social media, your emails, that kind of thing need to be tightened up and to the point. I'm talking bullet pointed version, not, it's so funny. I see people's posts on LinkedIn and on Instagram that are paragraphs long. Yeah, I ain't reading that. Like I'm out on that. That is not a message intended for me, somebody like me. So again, it's so important to know who you're speaking to because how you then message to them, it really depends on whether or not it's going to land. And for as much money, time, and resources that I know we as entrepreneurs are putting out there into the world and trying to let people know who we are and what we're all about, this is important stuff. So if you're communicating to, if you're messaging to an extrovert, that dominant or influencer type on the DISC profile, they like their information in bullet pointed forms. They're not going to read a 25-page handout. They're not going to read a 5-paragraph long post on LinkedIn. They're just not. They're going to scroll right past it. So if you know that you're working with these types of personality styles, be mindful of that. Right? Because we don't need to be spending all of this time developing content that they're never going to consume in the first place. So if we know that we're working with our steady relator and conscientious types, these types we know want more information. They want a lot to consume because they fear making mistakes. They fear confrontation. They fear major change. So they want all of that information so they feel confident and comfortable that the next step that they make is going to be the right step. Okay. And so with these types, we're going to send them a 25-page handouts. We're going to have the long posts and that kind of thing because these people want information. And so again, so critical to know who you're talking to because how we message ourselves really depends on that.
You've given me some serious light bulb moments already because dang, do I live hard in the D and I never and the I I live hard in the D space actually
Yeah.
in terms of my clients. And I start to like spin out and worry, do I need these like long, lengthy explanations of things? And now, where before I was like, well, let's experiment. Let's do some short form, do
Right.
some long form. But
Yeah.
now that I hear you say that, I'm like, why am I even bothering with all the like dense information by fire hose
Yeah.
if my people are really all very much D's? Like,
Oh,
this
absolutely.
was so worth doing the live just now, just to get that much. So thank you so much.
Well, and I always ask people, how do you wish to receive information? Like, do you need the handouts? Like, for example, I'm working a project in Jackson, Mississippi right now with some accountants, and a couple of the partners that I'm working with are the C types on the disc. So even though I'm an ID and I want my information bullet pointed, my client right now needs the 25-page handouts. And so I need to make sure that when I'm communicating with them, I'm giving them as much information as possible. So A, I know they're going to do it, because if they're consuming the content, they're going to do the thing, that I've asked them to do, because they have all the information in order to be able to do it. And so, I mean, it's just, we have to adjust if if we want to make money in business. We just do. You got to adjust. This isn't again, I just go back to the conversation I had just a few weeks ago with the business owners, like, so you're telling me I shouldn't be myself? No, absolutely, you should be yourself. But if your client needs X and you're only delivering Y, there's going to be friction here, and it ain't going to work long term. So you need to be mindful of that. Again, this is all just a lesson in self-awareness, knowing how you communicate, because how we communicate is not necessarily how people on the other side of the table communicate back.
Whew, I am changing my whole strategy thanks to that just golden nugget. Heather, you've been mentioning messaging a lot, get your messaging and thinking about your audience. I think sometimes we hear the word messaging, but we don't always know what that means. What does that mean? What does that word mean to you and how you use it in your business?
Yeah, I think there's two ways that messaging works for me and what I do, and for the people that I serve as well too. It's the verbal and the nonverbal ways that we communicate and how we message ourselves. When we walk into a room, people are already making assumptions as to whether or not they're going to pay attention to us and listen to us by how we messaged ourselves walking into a room. What do I mean by that? How am I owning the room? How am I walking into the room? How am I making eye contact with people? How am I smiling with people and exhibiting warmth, to show people that I'm really interested and want to be there, right? Also, how I look. Like, if I'm walking into a training and I've got a whole bunch of partners and C-suite level people that I'm working with, I'm probably going to make sure that I have a jacket on and I look the part. Right. If I were to walk in looking, wearing Lululemon and a no makeup on and that kind of thing, that's probably not going to set my messaging. My message that I'm sending is, I'm not professional, and I don't want that. So we've got to be mindful of both the verbal and nonverbal signals that we're sending people. Verbally, communication wise, if I know I'm walking into, like, for example, I had a meeting with a big CEO back in September, right after Labor Day. And he and I met for a one-on-one coffee and that kind of thing. I knew that and he's a high D type. I mean, I already knew that. He was a high D. I knew going into that meeting, first of all, he was like, I only have 30 minutes. We need to get to it. He told me that. Okay. So again, do I go in with a long, huge pitch deck of all the things that I wanted to talk to him about? Hell no, I didn't do that. I went in with my 3 to 5 bullet points that I wanted to be sure to cover with a call to action. We were in and out of there in 25 minutes. So you have to know that whoever the person is that you're going, if you know who that person is that you're going in to go speak with, that's one thing. If you don't know who that person is, you pay attention to those nonverbal signals, you ask a few questions, take my free guide here, super, super freaking helpful. And you message yourself accordingly. So to me, messaging is a combination of both the nonverbal and verbal cues that we all signal. And there it is. There's my website. So you can learn how to message and market your business to any personality type. So yeah, it's a good cheat sheet.
I love it. Heather, can you give me an example of some verbal messaging? Is that something that you're like thinking about in advance and kind of writing in your journal and having intentionality about?
I mean, just like with my CEO, I mean, I knew who I was going to go in and meet. I had had a couple conversations with people beforehand so I could glean even a little bit more information about this person. I do my research. I mean, before I have meetings with potential clients, don't kid yourself. I hop on LinkedIn, I do quick Google searches to see if they've written any articles, if they have any thought leadership out there into the world. I always like to see how they're messaging themselves, right? And so that really helps me me be able to fine tune what it is that I'm going to say. So, I mean, I think everybody needs to be doing a little bit of research before they meet with a new potential prospect, right? And because that information helps you to be able to disseminate what it is that you need to say and how you need to say it. Again, if I'm meeting with the C-suite level people, it's highly likely they're going to be a very dominant type. And I've got to be able to quickly articulate, here's how I can help. Here's where you need me. Here's how much it's going to cost. When can we get started? Boom. If I'm meeting with someone who's a lot like me, it's like, okay, excuse me, allergies kicking my butt here. But if I'm meeting somebody like me, who's more of a people person, I'm going to go in, ask them how their weekend was. Right now it's raining in Dallas. Oh my gosh, did you see the 4 inches of rain last night? Oh my, whatever. We're going to try to establish some rapport and a connection by telling stories about ourselves. And so with that being said, you've got to allow for a little bit of time to socialize and get to know each other, right?
It seems like you'd be able to really make a lot of inferences from someone's LinkedIn profile or the things they're publishing.
1000%.
Because if their articles are all bullet points and get to the facts, boy, that says a lot. If their articles are 25-page white papers about the history of leadership and the context of it and all of that, then you'll be able to make another whole other assessment.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
by doing that research and kind of reverse engineering based on their output, it's going to offer you a lot of insight.
This is just being smart. Like this isn't rocket science. This is just, if you want to land the business, you better know who you're talking to, and this is just one tool that helps with that. But, being able to understand this stuff really helps when you do those quick Google searches and you're like, okay. It was so funny. I was working with a client a couple of years ago she's a career coach. She worked for a long, long time for Wells Fargo as some high up senior VP of HR or something like that. And she retired. She went out on her own. And she's this career coach working primarily with mid-level people who are looking to that senior VP, even C-suite level positions and that kind of thing. And she was sharing with me her marketing materials and that kind of thing. So she is a CS on the disc. So she is high introvert, likes lots of information. Anyway, lots of information. That's her style or whatever. However, when she started describing who her ideal client was, it's somebody that was more of a D. And oh my gosh, bless her heart, she had paid so much money for a graphic artist, marketing firm to design all these, handouts. And I'm talking, she probably had 7 or 8 handouts that were a good 20 plus pages long, right? And that cost an arm and a leg to produce, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
No doubt. And I just was like, oh my gosh. So if you're marketing to a D-type personality, a dominant, makes decisions quick type of a person who likes their information and bite-sized nuggets, you're completely overwhelming them with content. Complete overwhelm, right?
And when people are overwhelmed, they walk away.
And so, and then also it's like, they're not booking any, they're not booking with you because you've given them all that they could possibly know and all of these 20-page handouts. I mean, you've oversold at this point and they're never going to buy from you. So, I mean, again, real aha moment, just because she communicated a certain way doesn't mean that her clients do either. Let's see.
Heather, we've got a comment
from
Tony. Hi, Tony. Delightful in our comments. He wants to know, what are the typical objectives of your one-on-one clients? What problems, issues, or goals are they pursuing? What would you say your sessions are semi-analogous to therapy with revolving concerns as they happen, or are there specific scenarios?
Oh, that is so funny because I felt like a little bit of a therapist yesterday, to be quite frank. Okay, so what are the typical objectives for my one-on-one? My one-on-one clients, I have very limited spots for one-on-one clients, and I'm doing a lot of marketing messaging for those people. I am really diving into, I do a lot of trainings on DISC and messaging, and frankly, actually, how do you message yourself in the LinkedIn space as well too. So with that being said, what problems, issues, or goals are they pursuing? I think the biggest problem and issue that they're having is that whatever their messaging is within their, their client messaging, their team's messaging, whatever, it's not landing. Like, for example, some of the things that I hear people say are, I don't feel like so-and-so got it when I met with them. I didn't click. These team members aren't clicking. Oh, this one team member isn't clicking with the client. Yeah, they're not relating with the client. Those are the words that people say. Like, they're not getting it. We're not landing. These people don't get along, right? And a lot of times, yeah, there's going to be jerks out there. I can't help the jerks. Like, if you're going to be a jerk, like, I can't help you with that, right? But what I can do is, a lot of the times, I mean, this team that I was working with yesterday, a couple of people on the team were the same type. Okay. And they were butting heads. And so we had to really get down into the nitty gritty as to what was causing this tension, this conflict to happen. And so, again, a lot of the times it's just people don't know how to articulate their needs. And with DISC, what I love about it is it really boils it down to, okay, you're a very data-minded person, and that maybe the person that you are working with is a little bit more of a people-focused person. And so you're pissing them off because you're not meeting them where they're at. You're just saying, I need this. And this other person over here is going, your messaging is coming across very harsh. I hear that too a lot. You're very harsh, and people don't want to respond to harshness. They just don't. I mean, they're out. So, again, a lot of the problems and struggles that I work through with people is just the message isn't landing. It's not resonating. Someone's not doing the thing that someone else thought that they made it crystal clear that they knew how to do, but there was a disconnect.
I think we've really moved on to kind of the second pillar of your own messaging, which is around lead your team. And that's where I'm hearing that real kind of disconnect between the two folks on the same team, of one wanting the data and the other being their feathers being rustled. Talk a little bit about, now that you've nailed your messaging, how do you use that to build a team? Or how are people who haven't figured this piece out kind of stunting or kind of unintentionally holding their team back?
Yeah, well, and this also has a lot to do with business development. A lot of the people that I'm working with are, I'm going to call them rising stars within their teams, and they will be partner one day. And if you want to become partner, especially an equity partner, like, you got to know how to bring clients in, right? And this is all about relationship and connections too, for that matter. So, again, when it comes to leading your team and, business development and getting your name out there and that kind of thing, if you're not doing these things, again, the friction is going to be, you're not going to be making the money and making the impact that you could be making if you don't know how to do it. So, and it's so funny. I see a lot of people say, oh, well, the marketing department handles business development or whatever like that. And I'm like, well, you know what? Business development skills and being able to relate to people and understanding their style. It's like, this is a life skill, folks.
BD is 100% relationship.
100%. 100%.
Like, not marketing at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's 100% relationship. Yeah. And so anyway, again, you got to know how to identify those types, and you got to know what to say in order to elicit the response that you're looking for.
Wow. And now scale your business. We're on that, and now we're on that same trajectory of just rising for scalability.
Right.
Like I said, like, who are you marketing to has absolutely been a game changer for me. Yeah. Because I've really been throwing mixed stuff out there.
You got it. I mean, and shoot, this is all a journey. I mean, Rebecca, we were talking about this before you hit the record button, but it's like, I'm still, just because I know a lot about this stuff, I'm still learning about how I can refine my own messaging and who it is that I need to be really speaking to. I mean, shoot, just a couple of weeks ago, I had a couple of other aha moments. I was like, oh, I need to say this when I'm talking. I mean, this is all just, if you're in business, if you're an executive or whatever, we're all just trying to figure out how to make that message just a little bit more tight, tighter, 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 because we know that the tighter those messages are, the more it's going to land with the intended person that we're looking to reach. Okay, there's another question here.
Yeah, we have another question from Janine. Hi, Janine.
Hey.
She wants to know, what do you suggest to organizations that are finding it challenging to navigate pushback on bringing someone like you in to help present DISC and resolve their issues?
Yeah.
Damn, Janine. She said the
Oh,
quiet part out.
Janine.
She said the quiet part out loud.
You know, I'll say this much. And I've said this to a CEO as well too, who asked me this question. I was like, well, you can continue having the pain and, you know, having the issues that you're having, because I can see that the strategy that you currently have in place is working for you, or else you wouldn't be even talking to me in the first place, right? So to bring someone in like me, I'm a third party, you know, or any other person out, you know, any other consultant that's worth their salt. And having a third party come in that doesn't know all of the internal little, you know, Susie doesn't like Johnny type of conflicts going on. It's like, I have a fresh set of eyes. I am no biases. I mean, that I can build, you know, it was so funny. I was telling my client who hired me yesterday to facilitate this strategic planning session with her team. I know how to ask the questions that frankly everyone else, she told me later, she was like, I wanted to ask the question that you asked, but I felt like it wasn't my place to ask that question because I'm the superior, you know, and I didn't want to, you know, make a wedge even deeper between them. And for me, it's like, I know my special sauce. I know I can see it. I can feel it when I'm talking to people and there's problems going on, and you ask another question, you dig a little bit deeper, you find out root causes of conflict with communication, with their messaging, with however they're doing their business development and that kind of thing. Sometimes it takes somebody who's not in the heat of battle on a daily basis with these folks to come in and really be able to dig in, ask the hard questions, and get people really talking. And I get fired up about that because I'm like, that is what I do. That is what I do. And I'm really freaking good at it. So I hate to toot my horn too much. It sounds weird to say that.
I don't want you to hate tooting your horn. That's what the Stone Fruit Roll-Up is all about, is tooting your dang horn for sure.
Well,
get Texas with it, lady.
Woo,
Get Texas
yeah,
with it.
seriously. Come on now. But navigating the pushback is, you know, my suggestion, Janine, and in all truth and fairness, it's like, if there's problems going on and they're pushing back on it, you know, my recommendation would be asking something along the lines of, so what do we have currently in place that's helping to achieve XYZ? Like, do we have a system in place to help with this? If not, we may want to think about bringing a third party who doesn't have eyeballs on all of the stuff going on internally to come in and help. I mean, you know, and I go back to, like I told my CEO a few months ago, I was just like, so if you're coming to me, I mean, obviously there's a problem. And if what you've been doing isn't working, like maybe we need to do something different. I don't know, just a thought, right? So
that's the beauty of thinking like an outsider and acting like an insider.
I know.
Having an immersive relationship with your clients. I want you to know that Janine comments that she loves it. I love it. You can continue having the pain or bring you in because you are a third party that doesn't know all the air quote family laundry.
So
Can
true.
ask the hard questions. Love it.
So
Thank
true.
you. Janine is in the public health space, and she's also the star of Business in the Raw, which is another delightful little show here at Stone Fruit, in which we follow one entrepreneur through the journey of a brand. And Janine is our entrepreneur on fire. So,
and Janine, I just have to tell you, oh my gosh, before I started my own business, I was chief of public affairs for a state elected official. So working in the government space as well, public health, I saw public health. So it's like, I mean, that's where I started to refine, you know, how I messaged myself, was because I was talking with people every 15 minutes of the day, from the governor's office to legislators to C-suites to teachers and administrators. You name it. It was a different type of a person sitting in front of me every 15 minutes. And you had to be able to quickly identify how I can diffuse a situation, because mostly they were pissed off about something, right? How can I quickly connect with them so that way they leave feeling seen, heard, understood, and that there was an action step happening next? Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was an experience.
You guys can relate for sure.
Oh yeah.
Indeed. Heather, can you tell us a story of transformation that one of your clients have experienced based on this understanding and insight about themselves and other people?
Oh yeah. Okay. So
I'm
I've got
putting
a
you on the spot. Got a story?
I've got all sorts of stories, but this one's really good. I mean, they're all really good, but this one's like a biggie. Okay. So so grab your favorite beverage, listen up. Um, so I was working with a partner at a large accounting firm a couple of years ago. And she's phenomenal at what she does, highly technical. She is a high C on the disc. And so meaning she's introvert and very task focused. All right. She is again logical, highly analytical, very data minded, and very non-emotional. This woman does not smile. Like she does not smile. She doesn't show how she's feeling about things. Again, just because she's not emotional doesn't mean that she doesn't have emotions. She just doesn't show it for the world to see. Okay, long story short, she was walking into a pitch meeting with a new client. And I mean, lots of money on the line here, right? Big deal. And when she walked, she was with her team. So she was with another partner and a couple of other junior associates and that kind of thing. She walks into this meeting and immediately goes, and this is, this is what she told me. She immediately goes to go search for the HDMI cable to plug in her laptop. Interesting thing. Let's fast forward. Meeting ends. The CFO of the company called the managing partner and was just like, hey, we're going to go with your firm, but we don't want to work with her. And she was devastated, like really upset. What the heck did I do wrong?
Hard not to take that personally, right?
Hard to not. And especially when we kind of, peeled back the layer of the onions and dug a little bit on it, because, like I said earlier, nonverbal cues signal so much. She walked into the room without smiling, making eye contact with the chief people at the table who were making decisions. And she missed that opportunity to be able to connect and develop trust and rapport. And because of that, and she's a high introvert as well too, and she's a partner, like she's done very well in her career, but this was a big deal with a very big missed opportunity. And so when we got to talking about it, and I was talking with one of the junior associates who was with her and told me what had happened, I was like, boom, that's where it was. Just because your style of communication is highly introverted and non-emotional, when you walk into that room and you see people talking and smiling and, talking about the crazy coffee drink that they ordered at the Starbucks drive-through, like whatever, that is your signal. That is your cue to engage in conversation, because those people are talking amongst themselves and having a good time. And if you don't connect, at least 30 seconds to a minute, be able to connect. That's all it takes. It's a missed opportunity. And that's exactly what happened. So it was so funny. She and I were talking. She did, we did the disc profile and that kind of thing. And we were talking about the nonverbal signals because that's a huge part of it. And I remember, what was it, about 6 weeks later, she texted me. She was like, hey, I just want to let you know, I walked into this meeting and I put and she was always blocking herself. She always had her arms crossed across her chest. I mean, how many people do we meet who either have a purse, a journal, their laptop, or their arms crossed? This is closed communication. We want open communication. And she was like, hey, I just want to let you know, I walked in this meeting, my arms were not crossed across my chest, and I smiled. And I was like, whoa. And I know it sounds so simple, but simple steps can make profound results. And I think that sometimes what we miss and where the disconnect is that we think that to get the business, to do the thing, to write the LinkedIn post, I've got to do all of these things. No, make it simple. Simple doesn't mean easy. I don't believe that either, for that matter, right? But when we make simple changes to the way that we communicate, whether that's verbally or non-verbally, the profound change can be you actually get the deal and you get you're compensated for that as well too, which is what we all want, right? Whether you're a business owner or executive, doesn't matter. So that was a huge transformation. Yeah.
That's an amazing story, and I love that she texted you and let you know how she really overcame her
Yeah,
natural tendency to not
yeah,
smile.
yeah.
But now I'm super curious because what a powerful way of thinking about, a real world situation. And I know you do a lot of public speaking. What would you advise to somebody who has a keynote presentation? Like, how do you know where people in the audience are? Are you giving them too much information? Or are you giving them the bullet points?
I
What do
mean,
you do personally?
yeah, I mean, I always talk to whomever the organizer is of what group I'm speaking to get a feel for, okay, who's the audience, who's going to be in the audience. Again, I know I speak to a lot of accountants and a lot of lawyers. And so I know that those people typically fall under the introvert, well, my C types are definitely the introverted and high task oriented type people. So if I know I'm speaking to a group like that, I've got to give more information, for them to actually, believe me as a competent source. Right. And so I always do some research beforehand. You got to, yeah. Who am I speaking to? And on the same token, especially when I'm live, whether that be, live, virtually or live in person, I always have to bring the energy up. I mean, that's how I keep people connected and engaged with me. I can't be an introvert when I'm speaking and presenting. I can't do that. I've got to bring the energy. I've got to make it high, high energy and that to keep people engaged with what I'm doing.
I've only known you for a long time. Oh, jeez, I've only known you for a little bit of time, but that energy you're talking about really comes through on your LinkedIn posts and your comments
Oh,
and the way
that's
you
good to
engage.
know.
Yeah, that energy is really there. In fact, you had commented on someone's post a couple of days ago, and I was like, "Wow, this just has so much vibrancy and energy to it." You really take the time to bring that up. It shows in your written stuff too.
Hey,
So,
I mean, if I'm going to call myself an expert, I better be doing this stuff, right?
the cobbler's children have no shoes, though.
Yeah.
Often for an entrepreneur, and since you mentioned I'm going to be doing that stuff, we're kind of coming to the end. Not kind of, we are coming to the end of this hour together. I want people to know how they can find you, how they
Yeah.
can work with you. What maybe do you have a cool newsletter for them to hang out with?
I
Ariana,
do.
but do you have a podcast? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Tell folks how they can connect with you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, go to my website, Heather Lisle. It's scrolling down there
It
on the
is.
bottom of the screen there, but heatherlisle.com. I do have a podcast. It's called the Game Changing Conversations podcast. And oh my gosh, I finished up my season 4, 3, I can't remember. And some awesome content out there, like incredible content. And so I'm so proud of that work because truly, the people, the experts that I've brought on to speak have been awesome. And so I highly encourage people, yeah, go check it out on the website. I've got tons of free resources on there as well too. I do a lot of group trainings, coaching, that kind of thing. So on my Work With Me tab, you can see about that as well too. I have a program called Partner Track, and it's what I'm doing actually with a couple of different offices here in Mississippi and in Dallas, Fort Worth, and that kind of thing, where I teach people, DISC fundamentals, like how do you best communicate? What type of style of communicator are you? How are you messaging yourself in that digital space? And let's talk about the business development and marketing side of it. Because if you're not doing that, you're going to get passed over, essentially. You're not going to be making that partner track. You're going to stay at a lower level. And especially with the advent of AI and AI being used in professional services as well, too, you got to stand out, and you got to bring in business. So I teach people how to do that. And
Well,
I
you
do
have
have a couple. Yeah, I was just go ahead.
no,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. You.
I was just going to say I do have a couple of consulting groups that I work with as well too. My one-on-one clients, very small piece anymore, just because some of the trainings and consulting contracts that I've got are just taking up a lot of time, which is great.
You're doing the thing, Mama. You're doing the thing.
Okay.
If you had a magic wand for your clients or for yourself or for people in general and could grant them one wish, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Self-awareness. Like just and more than just self-awareness, but if you know things about yourself, like be intentional and make the changes. I was in a training yesterday, and one of the people in the training was talking. He was all on his phone a lot, and I called it out in a funny, nice way, but I called it out. And because he was having trouble. Some of his teammates who are going to him for, problems, issues with clients, blah, 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 they weren't feeling like they were being heard by him. And that's what came up. And I was just like, I'm just going to put it out there into the universe and all. But I think that and I realize our phones are so connected to not just our personal lives, but our professional lives. We feel like we've got to constantly be on. But I do believe that you got to put it down on occasion, especially for people that are already telling you, I want to be seen and understood by you. They're telling you this. So do it, So if that is the issue, and so funny, he made the comment, he was like, that's what my marriage counselor says. And I was like, well, if you know this about yourself, if you already have self-awareness about that issue, do something about it. So, we can talk about how to communicate with different personalities, how to message yourself, blah, blah, blah. We can talk about it all day, but are you going to do it? Like, are you going to do the next thing? Or are we just going to sit around and talk about it? Right. And so self-awareness and then implementation based on what you know, not just sit there with information that's not going to take you anywhere.
Yeah, JT would call that self-authoring.
Oh, yes, she wrote about that. I saw the email yesterday.
She did. She has a podcast about it as well. We'll put all this stuff in the show notes, you guys, so you can learn just a little bit more about self-awareness, self-authoring. Heather Lisle, disc communication, and using it to create effective messaging, bond and build your team, scale your business, etc. And so while the person in your group needs to put down his phone, don't do it until after you've checked out all the show notes. Once you've done that, then you can put your phone down. And Heather, thank you so much for joining us today. I just loved our conversation.
Oh, so
It
good.
really gave me such a different perspective on messaging. I want to say thank you to Tony and Janine for putting in such thoughtful questions. And
absolutely. Love it.
And I hope that 4 inches of rain there in Dallas doesn't do anything more than I don't know, make up some barbecue joke here or something. Please go and check out Heather at her website. She has so many awesome resources. And I thank you for everybody's eyeballs and attention today.
Hey, thank you, Rebecca. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Let's come back next week and join us, folks, on the Stone Fruit Roll-Up, where Jill Moakes, resident business coach, will be back to rake me over the coals for another 3 weeks as we rewild Stone Fruit. All right. Thank you, Heather.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, audience.